David Harper's life had become a quiet monotony, a steady rhythm of work, school runs, and the occasional fleeting moments of joy that seemed almost accidental. He woke every morning at 6 a.m., the alarm buzzing relentlessly, and stumbled out of bed with the stiffness of someone carrying more than just the physical weight of exhaustion. His small apartment smelled faintly of burnt coffee and the lingering aroma of last night's dinner. By 6:15, he was in the kitchen, trying to make something edible for himself and his 7-year-old daughter Emma, whose energy seemed boundless, especially before she had even properly woken up. She often appeared at the breakfast table in mismatched pajamas, hair sticking out in every direction, demanding cereal with a volume and insistence that would startle anyone not used to it. David tried to answer her, his voice thick with sleep, offering instructions, spoonfuls of cereal, and gentle scoldings in equal measure. Emma was a perceptive child, far beyond her years in subtle ways, noticing moods, tensions, and silences that most adults overlooked. She had inherited her mother's bright eyes and curious mind, and though her mother had left years ago, she retained a longing for a complete family that David sometimes struggled to meet. He had been content to focus on providing stability, to make sure bills were paid, meals were served, and bedtime stories read. But he knew, deep down, that Emma felt the absence of something intangible, someone to nurture her the way a mother might. David himself felt a quiet emptiness, the lingering ache of a love lost, and the fear that he might never find someone who could be both, a partner to him and a loving presence for Emma. Work offered him no refuge. At the publishing firm where David worked as a content manager, emails and deadlines piled up in endless waves, each requiring immediate attention. His colleagues often remarked on his diligence and reliability, yet few knew the quiet sacrifices he made every day to maintain the fragile balance of his personal life. He ate lunch at his desk, often scrolling through Emma's school pictures on his phone, marveling at how she was growing into a clever, lively girl. Each photo, each smile captured, reminded him of both his blessings and the gaps in their lives, the absence of someone to share the small joys with, the absence of warmth in the evenings after school was done. Evenings were the hardest. Emma would greet him with stories about her day, excited and often relentless in her questions. "Daddy, why do some kids have both parents at school events and some kids don't?" she asked one evening as he unpacked his briefcase, his hands trembling slightly from fatigue. David paused, swallowing hard, unsure how to respond. He didn't want her to feel sorrow or resentment, but honesty demanded something deeper than a casual reassurance. "Because families are all different, pumpkin," he said softly, choosing words that were honest yet gentle. Emma nodded thoughtfully, her eyes searching his face as if trying to discern unspoken truths, and then ran off to finish her homework, leaving David staring at the wall, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. Weekends brought their own form of chaos. Grocery runs, laundry, and cleaning consumed hours, leaving little space for fun or spontaneity. David tried to take Emma to parks or museums, but even these excursions were often marred by the shadow of his worry. Unfinished work, looming deadlines, and the nagging sense that he wasn't doing enough to fill the gaps in her life. Despite this, Emma remained a bright spark, radiating energy and curiosity, asking endless questions, drawing pictures of their imaginary adventures, and sometimes, in her quiet moments, looking at him with a gaze that said she needed more than he had been giving. One particular Saturday, David found himself watching her as she arranged her dolls in a precise circle, narrating elaborate stories as if conducting a council of miniature leaders. Her tiny voice carried both authority and imagination, a vivid reminder of the intelligence and sensitivity she possessed. He knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and asked, "Do you like it when I play with you?" Emma paused, considering, then replied, "I like it when we do things together, Daddy. I like it when we're a team." Her words, simple yet profound, struck him deeply. It was a reminder that she didn't need perfection, wealth, or elaborate gifts. She needed presence, attention, and care. The very things he had often assumed he was providing but now realized he could always do better. The absence of Emma's mother weighed heavily on both of them, though neither spoke of it directly. David had tried dating, attempted casual relationships, but the thought of introducing someone new into their lives had always seemed daunting. He feared judgment, rejection, and the potential for heartbreak, not just for himself, but for Emma. The apartment felt safe in its routines, predictable, and insulated from risk, yet he understood quietly that both he and Emma were longing for something more, a family that felt whole, a home that felt complete. That night, after tucking Emma into bed, David lingered outside her door, listening to the soft sound of her breathing. He thought about the life they were building, the small victories in daily routines, and the gaps that remained. He realized that life had become a careful act of balancing survival with love, and though he had managed it well, there was room for something more, something he had been too afraid to pursue. Emma's eyes, her questions, and her innate wisdom whispered to him that he couldn't wait forever for the perfect circumstances. Love, he understood, required courage, vulnerability, and the willingness to take a chance. David sat alone in the living room, the quiet of the apartment pressing in around him. He reflected on the weeks, months, and years since Emma's mother had left, and he recognized a pattern of half-lived life, one that prioritized stability and survival over fullness and connection. His daughter deserved a home filled with warmth, laughter, and the presence of someone who could love her wholly. And he, too, deserved companionship, someone who could walk beside him, not to replace what was lost, but to build something new. He understood that the next steps he took could change the course of their lives entirely, and though the thought terrified him, it also filled him with a quiet hope. As he turned off the lights and finally prepared for bed, David felt a flicker of determination. Tomorrow could be the beginning of something different, a step toward healing a ND connection. He didn't yet know how it would happen or who might enter their lives, but the thought of possibility, of a future in which both he and Emma could experience joy, love, and belonging, was enough to make the long, weary day feel lighter. In the quiet of the apartment, David Harper, single dad and weary guardian of a bright, perceptive child, felt the first stirrings of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, life had more to offer than routine and solitude. The following Monday, David's life took an unexpected turn, though he didn't realize it at the time. It started with a simple knock at the door just as he was preparing Emma's breakfast. He opened it to find a woman standing there, holding a basket of homemade cookies, her expression warm and slightly tentative. She introduced herself as Clara, a new neighbor who had just moved into the apartment next door. "Hi. I thought I'd come by and say hello," she said, smiling. David blinked, surprised, and offered a polite but cautious greeting. He wasn't used to people reaching out, especially not strangers who seemed so genuinely friendly. Emma, however, had a completely different reaction. The moment Clara appeared, Emma's eyes lit up with curiosity and excitement. "Daddy, can we invite her in?" she asked, bouncing on the balls of her feet. David hesitated, torn between politeness and his protective instinct, but Clara's warmth was disarming, and he realized there was no harm in letting her sit for a cup of coffee. As she entered the apartment, Clara greeted Emma with the kind of patience and enthusiasm that made the child instantly comfortable. She knelt to Emma's level, asking about her toys, her school, and her favorite hobbies. Emma, usually reserved with strangers, began talking animatedly, describing her drawings, her latest school project, and even her favorite bedtime stories. David watched in astonishment, noticing how effortlessly Clara engaged with Emma, offering encouragement and laughter. Clara stayed longer than David expected, chatting about small neighborhood details, upcoming events, and local parks. David was polite, but inwardly cautious, wondering what her intentions were. He wasn't looking for romance. He was barely keeping his head above water, managing work, parenting, and his own emotional exhaustion. Yet there was something undeniably comforting about Clara's presence. She didn't judge, she didn't intrude, and she carried a warmth that made the apartment feel lighter, even in the short time she had been there. Emma, sensing the shift, immediately leaned closer to Clara, whispering to David, "Daddy, she could be our mom." David froze at that comment, the words echoing in his mind. He looked at Emma, whose eyes were wide and sincere, filled with a hopeful curiosity that was almost heartbreaking. "Pumpkin," he began, careful with his tone, "that's a big thing to say." Emma shrugged as if her logic was undeniable. "She's nice. She plays with me, and she smiles. We'd be happy, Daddy. Don't you want that?" David felt his chest tighten. He loved Emma more than anything in the world, and the idea of making her happy was always at the forefront of his decisions. But the thought of bringing someone new into their home, someone who might never stay, scared him more than he wanted to admit. Over the next few days, Clara became a subtle, yet steady presence in their lives. Emma would find small reasons to run next door or invite her over. "Clara, can you help me with this puzzle?" Or, "Clara, look at this picture I drew." Clara always responded with warmth and enthusiasm, never imposing herself, never rushing them, simply being there. David began noticing the subtle ways his daughter's mood improved when Clara was around. She laughed more easily, spoke more freely, and even seemed to tackle her homework with renewed energy. He couldn't deny the effect. He saw a part of Emma's life he had been missing, a sense of completeness, a spark of joy that had been absent for far too long. One Friday evening, after Clara had left their apartment following a small baking session with Emma, David sat on the couch, running his hands through his hair. He reflected on the past week, realizing that something inside him had shifted. Clara wasn't just a pleasant neighbor. She was kind, attentive, and genuinely good with Emma. More than that, she didn't pressure him, didn't demand attention or commitment, and somehow, this made him feel safe enough to even consider the impossible, opening his heart again. But fear lingered. He had been hurt before, and the thought of introducing a new adult into Emma's life felt like stepping onto a tightrope suspended over years of careful routine and emotional self-preservation. Emma, however, was not subtle about her intentions. That night, as David tucked her into bed, she whispered with determination, "Daddy, Clara should live with us. She'd make everything better." David's breath caught. The simplicity and earnestness of her plea made it impossible to dismiss. He knelt beside her bed, holding her hand, and said softly, "Emma, it's not that simple." She frowned, tilting her head. "Why not? I love her, and she loves me. Doesn't that matter?" The intensity in her gaze was undeniable, and David realized that he had spent so long trying to protect her from disappointment that he had overlooked the possibility of happiness arriving in a way he hadn't expected. The next morning, David found himself thinking about Clara more than he wanted to admit. Her smile, her laugh, the way she encouraged Emma, even the way she had listened without judgment, they all lingered in his mind. At work, he caught himself daydreaming about what it might be like if she were part of their daily lives, part of the routines he and Emma had built together. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. He had promised himself he would never rush into anything again, that their lives had to be stable first. Yet, for the first time in years, the idea of sharing his life with someone felt like a possibility worth exploring. That weekend, David reluctantly agreed to a longer visit from Clara, letting her and Emma bake cookies, play board games, and even watch a movie together. He observed from the couch, initially tense, but gradually the atmosphere relaxed. Clara laughed with Emma, encouraged her, and made her feel special in ways David sometimes feared he couldn't. And then, in a quiet moment, Emma leaned against him and whispered again, "Daddy, she's perfect for us." David's heart ached with emotion. He realized that his daughter's happiness was intricately tied to her sense of family, and perhaps he had been wrong to think he could provide everything alone. By the end of that weekend, David knew something profound had begun to change. Clara had entered their lives gently, naturally, without pressure, and yet the impact was undeniable. Emma's joy, her laughter, and her whispered insistence that Clara belong with them were impossible to ignore. David felt a mixture of fear and hope, fear of vulnerability, of heartbreak, of disrupting their fragile stability, but hope, too, that perhaps life had offered them the possibility of a new beginning, one in which they could all be a family. That night after Clara had gone home, David sat on the edge of Emma's bed, reflecting on the week's events. He understood that the path ahead would not be simple. There would be challenges, doubts, and moments of uncertainty. But for the first time in years, he felt that glimmer of possibility, the faint spark of something wonderful that might grow if nurtured with care. Emma, asleep beside him, murmured in her sleep, "Clara should stay." And David whispered back, barely audible even to himself, "Maybe she will." It was the first time he had felt a flicker of courage in years. For the first time, he entertained the thought that happiness wasn't something distant or impossible. It could arrive quietly, in the form of a neighbor, a friend, a gentle presence who loved his daughter and respected him. And if he was brave enough to open his heart, perhaps, just perhaps, life could finally feel complete. Over the next few weeks, the presence of Clara in their lives became a subtle, steady force that neither David nor Emma could ignore. What began as casual visits soon evolved into shared moments that brought warmth and laughter back into their apartment, transforming it in ways David hadn't realized were missing. On weekday evenings, Clara would pop by with small treats or help Emma with her homework, sitting at the kitchen table as they tackled math problems and science worksheets. David would watch from his chair, a cup of coffee in hand, and notice the way Emma's eyes lit up when Clara praised her efforts. He had always encouraged Emma, of course, but there was something in Clara's demeanor, a combination of patience, attentiveness, and gentle humor that made learning feel like an adventure rather than a chore. Emma, for her part, thrived in Clara's presence. She became bolder in expressing her thoughts, more confident in her small accomplishments, and surprisingly affectionate toward David in ways that seemed to spring naturally from Clara's guidance. One afternoon, while they were baking cookies together, Emma whispered conspiratorially to David, "Daddy, she makes me feel like I can do anything." He felt his chest tighten at her words, recognizing the truth in them. Clara didn't just fill a gap left by her mother. She enhanced what they already had. The small, careful gestures, the way she tied Emma's hair back, the way she listened when Emma rambled about school, the way she laughed at their cookie mishaps, created a sense of stability and joy that David had longed to cultivate, but had struggled to achieve alone. David himself found himself drawn to Clara in ways that surprised him. Her presence was comforting, not demanding, and she had a way of listening without judgment, which allowed him to feel seen in ways he hadn't in years. Their conversations, initially brief and cautious, grew deeper. They shared stories of their pasts, their struggles, and the small joys they found in daily life. David discovered that Clara was not only kind to Emma, but also wise and insightful, able to offer perspectives that helped him navigate the complexities of single parenthood. The more time he spent with her, the more he realized that she wasn't just a visitor in their lives. She was becoming a part of them, a bridge to a future he hadn't dared to imagine. One rainy evening, The three of them were sprawled across the living room floor, working on a large art project for Emma's school assignment. Paper, glue, and crayons were scattered everywhere, yet laughter echoed through the apartment, filling spaces that had long been silent. David noticed the way Emma and Clara worked together, coordinating colors and shapes, sharing ideas and encouragements. He saw Clara's gentle guidance, the way she allowed Emma to lead while subtly shaping the project toward success. It struck him that this was the very thing he had feared introducing, another adult into their carefully balanced lives, and yet, watching them together, he felt a surge of gratitude. For the first time, he realized that love didn't have to compete. It could complement, amplify, and create a richer life for both him and his daughter. The transformation extended to David as well. He found himself laughing more easily, relaxing into moments he would previously have spent fretting over work emails or unpaid bills. Clara had a way of grounding him, of reminding him that presence and attentiveness mattered more than perfection or control. He began to look forward to their interactions, to the warmth she brought into mundane activities like grocery shopping, cooking, or reading bedtime stories. Emma, always perceptive, noticed the change in her father and responded with increased affection, sensing the subtle shift in their home's energy. Even small rituals, like bedtime stories or Sunday morning pancakes, felt infused with new life, a shared joy that David had never expected could return so fully. Despite the ease that was growing between them, David remained cautious. He knew the risks of attachment, both for himself and for Emma. He worried that if Clara's presence ended abruptly, it could destabilize the fragile sense of security he had worked so hard to build. He also feared for his own heart, which had been cautious and weary for so long. Yet, each time he saw Emma's happiness or the gentle way Clara guided her, he felt a small, insistent tug toward something he hadn't allowed himself to pursue in years, the possibility of family, not just a household or a routine, but a true, interconnected unit built on trust, care, and love. One evening, after Clara had helped Emma prepare for a school presentation, David found himself alone in the kitchen with her. The apartment was quiet, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of rain against the window. Clara looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of warmth and understanding. "David," she said softly, "I can see how much you care for her, and how much she needs you, but she also needs someone who will stay, who will share the little things with you both. You don't have to do it alone." Her words, gentle yet deliberate, struck him profoundly. He realized that this was the bridge he had been hesitant to cross, the realization that allowing love into their lives didn't diminish his role as a father, but strengthened the very foundation of their family. Emma, ever perceptive, seemed to sense the unspoken tension and the quiet understanding forming between them. She would often nudge situations in Clara's favor, asking her to stay for dinner or help with bedtime routines. One night, as David watched Clara help Emma brush her teeth, he felt the weight of possibility press upon him. Emma looked up at him, her small eyes wide and expectant, and whispered, "Daddy, can she stay forever?" The innocence of her request was tempered with a wisdom that only a child possessed, the understanding that love could be both transformative and grounding. David felt a lump in his throat, realizing that the answer he feared to give was also the answer his heart longed to hear. As the weeks continued, David and Clara navigated the delicate process of building trust, connection, and familiarity. Their relationship was not without challenges, awkward silences, moments of doubt, and the occasional clash of expectations, but each obstacle served to deepen their understanding of one another. David found that sharing responsibilities with Clara, even in small ways, allowed him to reclaim energy and patience he hadn't realized he had lost. Emma thrived, her laughter filling the apartment, her energy no longer shadowed by the absence of a nurturing presence. In quiet moments, David would catch himself smiling at Clara, marveling at the simple truth that sometimes The right person could enter your life in the most unexpected way, reshaping it entirely without forcing the change. By the end of part 3, it was clear that Clara was no longer a mere neighbor or friend. She had become an integral part of their lives. Emma's joy and confidence were growing. David's heart was opening to the possibility of love again. And the apartment, once a place of routine and quiet endurance, had transformed into a home filled with laughter, warmth, and hope. They were building bridges, not just between themselves, but toward a future in which the bonds of family, nurtured with care and attention, could flourish. And for the first time in years, David allowed himself to imagine a life that was not half-lived, but fully, vibrantly shared. Even as the weeks passed and the warmth of Clara's presence became a natural part of their lives, David felt an undercurrent of tension growing within him, a tension born of fear, doubt, and the recognition that opening his heart was far more complicated than he had anticipated. On most days, the laughter, the shared dinners, and the quiet moments of connection made him feel alive again. But on other days, uncertainty crept in. He worried about the risks of attachment, the potential heartbreak, and the changes that bringing Clara fully into their home might create. What if she decided to leave? What if Emma became disappointed? And what if he himself was not ready to love again? These questions haunted him, often at the quietest, most vulnerable moments of the day. Clara, for her part, sensed his hesitation, though she never pressed him. She understood the delicate balance of entering a life that had been shaped by loss and careful routines. Still, her own heart sometimes ached at the subtle distance David maintained, the way he would occasionally retreat into work or solitary thought, even in moments when they were together. She longed to offer her love freely, to become part of their lives fully, but she knew that forcing her presence could destabilize what they had built. Instead, she leaned on patience, letting her actions speak, helping Emma with homework, sharing small acts of kindness, laughing at minor mishaps in the kitchen, while waiting for David to reach the point where he could allow himself to trust. Emma, as ever, was perceptive. She noticed the unspoken tension between the adults, and it frustrated her. To her, the solution was obvious. She wanted Clara to stay, to belong to their family as fully as she already felt she did. In her small, determined way, she tried to push them together, asking Clara to read bedtime stories, help with school projects, or even inviting her on a weekend outing under the guise of a playdate. One evening, after David had been unusually quiet and withdrawn following a stressful day at work, Emma tugged at his sleeve, her voice firm yet tender. "Daddy, why do you push her away? I like her. She makes us happy. Don't you want that?" Her words cut through his defenses, leaving him both guilty and unsure. How could he explain that his fear of loss, of disruption, and of heartbreak sometimes outweighed his desire for happiness? The tension reached a peak one rainy Saturday. Clara had invited them to bake together, as they often did, but David arrived home later than expected, tired and stressed from work. He found Clara and Emma in the kitchen, flowers scattered across the counters and laughter filling the room. Yet he couldn't shake the anxiety that had been building all week. He criticized small mistakes Emma made while mixing ingredients, and his tone, sharp with exhaustion, surprised even him. Clara looked at him, a flicker of concern in her eyes, while Emma's face fell, confusion and hurt mingling in her expression. The room, usually vibrant and warm, felt heavy, and David immediately regretted letting his stress spill over. After the baking session, David retreated to his office, leaving Clara and Emma to clean up. His chest tightened as he listened to their laughter fade into silence, realizing that his fear of vulnerability had created a small but significant crack in the harmony they had worked to build. Clara, sensing his inner struggle, approached him gently. "David," she said softly, "I know this isn't easy, but you can't keep letting fear decide your life. You love Emma, and I care for both of you. We don't need perfection. We just need honesty, trust, and a willingness to try." Her words resonated, stirring something deep within him. He realized she was right. His hesitation, while understandable, was preventing him from embracing the joy and connection that he had longed for. Over the next few days, the trio navigated the subtle fractures caused by tension. David tried to engage more intentionally, forcing himself to slow down and listen when Emma spoke, even when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him. Clara continued her patient presence, allowing David to find his rhythm while demonstrating her commitment to their lives. Emma, too, adapted, though her impatience occasionally surfaced, manifested in whispered reminders, small acts of persuasion, or bursts of determination to keep the family together. Through it all, the unspoken challenge became clear. For love to flourish, each of them had to confront fear, embrace vulnerability, and allow themselves to be seen completely. A defining moment came during a quiet evening as the rain tapped softly against the windows. David was reading Emma a bedtime story when she suddenly looked up at him with wide, earnest eyes. "Daddy, I don't want you to be scared. I know you like Clara. I know she likes you. Can't you just try?" Her words, simple yet piercingly sincere, forced him to confront the depth of his own fears. He realized that his hesitation was not protecting them. It was limiting the life they could all share. Emma's wisdom, expressed in the pure honesty of a child, became the mirror he needed to face his own heart. That night, David sat alone in the living room, reflecting on the challenges and fears that had been building. He understood that love, like life, required risk. There was no guarantee of permanence, no certainty that pain would be avoided, but there was also the possibility of immense joy, connection, and family. He recalled Clara's patient guidance, Emma's unwavering belief, and the quiet, transformative presence they had both brought into his life. Slowly, a sense of clarity emerged. He needed to act, to embrace the vulnerability that had frightened him for so long, and to allow himself to open fully to the possibility of love. The next morning, David resolved to take the first step. He planned a simple outing with Clara and Emma, a walk through the nearby park followed by a picnic. He communicated openly with Clara about his fears, admitting that his hesitation came from a place of protection and love, not disinterest or doubt. Clara listened, nodding, and reassured him that she understood completely. Emma, sensing the significance of the day, bounced alongside them, her excitement infectious. The outing was not flawless. There were small disagreements, moments of impatience, and minor mishaps. Yet, despite these imperfections, it became a defining moment in their journey, a tangible step toward trust, connection, and the family life David had long avoided imagining. By the evening, as they returned home, David felt the tension that had weighed so heavily in previous weeks begin to dissolve. He watched Clara help Emma hang up her coat, the gentle intimacy between them filling the apartment with warmth. He realized that the challenges they had faced were not failures, but lessons. Lessons about trust, courage, and the importance of embracing love despite fear. David understood that to truly build a family, he would need to confront his past, accept vulnerability, and let go of the notion that he had to protect himself and Emma from all potential disappointment. Only by taking this risk could they all experience the fullness of connection they so clearly desired. That night, after tucking Emma into bed, David lingered in the hallway, watching her drift into sleep. Clara sat beside him, silently offering comfort and companionship. In that quiet moment, he realized that love required bravery, and family required risk. The tension, though real and challenging, had also guided them toward a deeper understanding of themselves and each other. David made a silent promise to embrace this path, to nurture the bonds forming between them, and to allow Clara to become not just a presence in their lives, but a permanent part of the home and heart they were building together. The following weeks were filled with quiet transformation. David, Clara, and Emma began to settle into a rhythm that felt natural, comfortable, and surprisingly effortless. The tension that had previously hovered over their interactions softened, replaced by a sense of trust and shared purpose. David found himself laughing more freely, not just with Emma, but with Clara as well. He discovered that life could be both manageable and joyous, that responsibilities didn't need to overshadow love and connection. Clara's presence brought warmth to routines that had once felt mundane. Morning breakfasts, homework sessions, and bedtime rituals all became moments of shared affection and laughter rather than tasks to be endured. Emma thrived in ways David had scarcely imagined. She was more confident at school, engaged eagerly in her hobbies, and blossomed socially, fueled by the stability and joy she experienced at home. Clara encouraged her independence while supporting her growth, gently guiding her through challenges, celebrating successes, and offering comfort during setbacks. Emma's whispered reassurances to David, "Daddy, she's perfect for us," were no longer mere hopes. They reflected a truth he had slowly come to accept. The child's insight had become prophetic, showing him that love, when nurtured patiently, could transform lives in ways even adults sometimes overlooked. David, too, embraced the change within himself. He recognized that opening his heart to Clara did not diminish his role as a father, it enhanced it. He was learning step by step to trust, to communicate honestly, and to share his life in a way he had avoided for years. The fear of heartbreak remained, but it no longer dictated his choices. Instead, he focused on the present, cherishing the laughter, the quiet conversations, and the small acts of kindness that Clara brought into their home. He realized that love was not about perfection, but about commitment, patience, and courage. The willingness to embrace vulnerability and take risks for the sake of family. One afternoon, David returned from work to find Clara and Emma in the living room, preparing for a small indoor picnic. The apartment, usually orderly and quiet, was filled with laughter, the soft hum of music, and the aroma of freshly baked bread and fruit. Emma had insisted that Clara stay longer, arranging cushions and blankets on the floor, while Clara playfully helped her set up a pretend feast. David paused at the doorway, watching the scene unfold, and felt a warmth in his chest unlike anything he had experienced in years. This was more than friendship or companionship. It was family, built not from obligation but from genuine affection, trust, and shared joy. That evening, after their indoor picnic, they decided to have a small discussion about the future, guided by Emma's insistence. "Daddy, Clara should live here with us," she said confidently, placing her small hands on David's. Clara smiled at David, her eyes encouraging yet patient, giving him the space to make his own decision. David took a deep breath, feeling the weight of both fear and hope pressing upon him. He reflected on the weeks of laughter, shared responsibilities, and moments of connection, realizing that the life they could have together was more vibrant, joyful, and stable than anything he had dared to imagine alone. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady and resolute. "Emma, Clara, I think you're right. I want us to be a family, together. I want this home to be our home, filled with love, laughter, and care for each other." Emma's face lit up with uncontainable joy, her small hands clapping together as she hugged both David and Clara. Clara's smile radiated warmth and relief, and she reached out to take David's hand, a quiet promise of partnership and shared commitment passing between them. In that moment, the apartment no longer felt like a house filled with routines. It became a home, a sanctuary of love, trust, and belonging. The following weeks were devoted to blending their lives fully. Clara began moving in gradually, bringing small touches of her personality to the apartment, while David adapted to sharing both responsibilities and joys. Emma thrived in the stability of a complete family, her laughter filling every room, her excitement about life palpable and contagious. David and Clara learned to navigate their differences, communicating openly about routines, expectations, and hopes for the future. Each challenge they faced became an opportunity to strengthen their bond, to practice patience, understanding, and the shared commitment required to build a lasting family. One evening, as they all sat together around the dinner table, David felt a profound sense of peace. The clatter of dishes, the chatter of Emma, and Clara's laughter formed a symphony of life that was rich, imperfect, and beautiful. He realized that happiness was not found in perfection, but in the deliberate choice to nurture love, connection, and family. The walls of their home, once silent and stark, now echoed with warmth, trust, and joy. David knew that the challenges they had faced, the doubts, fears, and tensions, had been necessary steps, shaping them into a family that was resilient, compassionate, and deeply connected. Emma, perched on her chair with a mischievous grin, looked at her father and Clara, her small voice filled with certainty. "See, Daddy? This is exactly what I wanted." David chuckled, ruffling her hair affectionately. Clara leaned in, kissing Emma on the forehead, and whispered, "And I'm glad I get to stay." In that simple exchange, the essence of their journey became clear. Love had triumphed over fear, connection had replaced hesitation, and the whispers of a child had sparked a transformation none of them could have predicted. As night fell and Emma drifted into a peaceful sleep, David and Clara sat together on the couch, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. They spoke quietly, sharing their hopes, acknowledging their fears, and celebrating the new life they were building. David felt gratitude unlike any he had known, not just for Clara, but for Emma, whose insight and courage had guided them all toward this moment. They had learned that family was not defined solely by circumstance, but by love, dedication, and the willingness to take risks for one another. By the time David turned off the lights and prepared for bed, he felt a sense of contentment and anticipation. Life would continue to present challenges, but he now understood that together they could face them with courage, patience, and unwavering love. Their home was no longer just a place to eat, sleep, and survive. It was a sanctuary of shared joy, a space where each of them could grow, thrive, and experience the fullness of life. For the first time in years, David Harper allowed himself to believe that happiness, love, and family could coexist, and that the journey they had taken together was only the beginning of a life filled with warmth, laughter, and hope. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through the windows and Emma bounded out of bed with her usual energy, David watched her and Clara interact, their laughter mingling in the bright kitchen. He realized that what had begun as a tentative friendship had blossomed into a family, complete and whole. His heart, once guarded and cautious, was now open, filled with gratitude, joy, and the unshakable knowledge that love, when nurtured, heal wounds, bridge gaps, and create a home where everyone belonged. And in that quiet understanding, David knew that the whispers of his daughter, the patience of Clara, and his own willingness to take a chance had truly changed everything.